it always made us laugh growing up whenever somebody would come to him and be like, man, why didn't you tell me I wasn't supposed to move here? You know, you're my pastor, you're my covering. Why didn't you tell me? And he'd be like, well, you said God said. And if God told you, I'm not going to be the one to try and talk you out of it. It's like, at the end of the day,
be fully persuaded, Paul would say. Be fully persuaded, yeah.
There's mentors in my life that I've always heard say that if it feels like God's been quiet, do the last thing that he told you. Yeah, he does move on. There are new seasons, there are new chapters, but God's also the same yesterday, today, and forever. He's not flighty. He doesn't just run off and lead you on a wild goose chase. It's like, man, just go to the last thing that God told you.
Welcome to episode 138 of the NRT Now podcast. I'm your host, Jake. And if this is your first time with us or you've been with us for a while, just want to say thank you for taking the time and spending it with us here. And if you haven't already, to make sure that you are subscribed, following, whatever that looks like on your favorite podcast platform. That way you know when new episodes come out. Our guest for this episode is Consumed by Fire. So the Ward brothers, Caleb, Jordan, and Josh, have been doing ministry through music for probably longer than they haven't. And in that time, back in 2017, they had a song called I Need You, God, that took radio by storm. And here in 2023, they have another song that's just absolutely taken radio by storm. It's getting all the airtime, award nominations, all the things. And it's called First Things First. And they share not only the story behind this song, which is birthed out of just being three brothers on the road with everything that happens with three siblings on the road, but just recentering what we're doing to make sure that God is first and not all the distractions and all the stuff. We had a lot of fun recording this episode. Caleb, Josh, Jordan, if you ever need any help with shenanigans out on the road or just somebody to tag along, you know where to find me, guys. But without further ado, here's my conversation with Consumed by Fire. We are here with the Ward brothers, better known as Consumed by Fire. Good to have you guys on here, guys.
Man,
happy to be, brother.
Thanks for having me.
Well, since there's three of y'all, can you guys introduce yourselves so we get your voice and who's talking what and who's giving each other grief as we go through here?
I'm Jordan.
I'm Caleb.
I'm Josh.
So, three brothers, what got you guys thinking like, hey, we should do music together instead of, throwing pillows or random toys or whatever at each other? Maybe we should start doing some music together.
Sure. Well, I think growing up in the church, being a very ministry-minded family, our parents pastoring for 35 plus years, it was all very natural. We were on the worship teams growing up and things like that until one thing just led to another. We always watched mom and dad as they would travel as well, so we would travel with them. It was sort of one of those things we wanted to have our own ministry. So by the time Caleb was 13, we convinced mom and dad to homeschool us so that we could tour. And they prayed about it, obviously, because that's a big deal. I think Caleb might have already been a year into homeschooling or whatever, but then it was like, hey, homeschool me too. Let's do this. Let's tour. And then that becomes a bigger deal. A little bit more to bite off.
Yeah.
But they supported it. And then as the story goes, we did more than 100 shows that first year, playing anywhere and everywhere we could.
Wow. And
just never stopped. It's the part of the story we would like to leave out because it's embarrassing. Like when you go back and Google any images, hopefully most of them, the team's been able to remove most of the ones we hate.
Oh, you do. Yeah.
But the reason we keep telling the story, one, I think it's good for young kids that really want to get into this. And it's good for parents that don't know if they should support their kids to do it or not. I think we're a testimony that of God's faithfulness, number one. But then two, we've never been what we would consider the most talented, but we always were faithful and showed up. And then just look what God's done. So
absolutely.
So I'm at that age where, like, thankfully there wasn't too many camera phones. Like, it was all still disposable cameras and all that. Yeah, so I am so happy, like you guys are saying, that there are very few pictures of me growing and some of that kind of stuff.
All of our awkward phases happened in front of
a good friend. Actually, just yesterday. It's funny we're talking about this. I forgot to tell you. A good buddy of ours, he DM'd me and he was like, "Hey, bro, I found this old pic. I'm looking through pics.
Oh no,
it's when I was 12, so you had to be like 15. Oh my God, I laughed so hard. I'm like, you know what? How dare you? This is epic. Please send me more.
Just so we can know what to track.
Oh, no, I love it. It's so cringe. It makes you, I don't know. It's awesome.
Yeah, I still have pictures running around somewhere when I thought Slim Shady was cool, and I did the whole hair dye thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of pictures that I wish I could burn, but at the same point, like, you can't burn them.
It's part of the journey, man. It's part of the journey.
You got to remind yourself that you were stupider than you were today once in a while.
You see God's grace in that.
Yeah, it's humbling.
Or, when my kids get older, be like, hey, if you think this is a good idea now, let's look at the picture from what I thought was a good idea way back in the day.
Hashtag parachute pants, you know what I mean? Which, weirdly enough, I think all those things are coming back. I can't understand it, but anyways, it's good.
Coming back.
This is my moment, all that stuff's coming back. My era, man.
Yeah, man.
So growing up, who actually got hurt the most with all the brother shenanigans?
Man, that's a good question. Nobody ever asked us.
I want to say I probably got hurt the most, but I feel like Jordan got the brunt of the shenanigans. For sure.
Just because I never wanted to be involved and they would force me. I'm the middle brother, but I was always this 70-year-old man as a kid that just was like, hey, y'all, you're going to get hurt. Y'all might want to knock that off. And then Caleb and Josh would bring it to me as I'm sitting there reading a book or whatever, you know what I mean? I'm kidding. No, I'm just.
He was like 8 years old with a Starbucks in the background somewhere.
That's ridiculous.
My scarf, knitting something.
Yeah, thankfully none of us really got hurt like that. The only time it would be, kind of like an injury or anything that came from football.
Yeah.
So, a few broken bones from football over the years, but besides that, everybody was pretty good.
Fell off a horse once, broke a rib.
Yeah. And I think it was my horse that actually spooked his horse. So, again, it was still my fault,
Yeah.
Yeah. There's just a difference growing up with brothers versus sisters. Like, I have sisters with my mom and brothers with my dad. And it was just a whole different story when I go down to my dad's house in the summer and it was all of us boys. There's just like this stark contrast. There's just something different about the roughhousing, what shenanigans you get into, the things you think is a good idea with your brothers that you would never even think of with your girls.
It's weird. Sisters. We were a little more responsible as kids. I think when we were on the road, I think I was in my early 20s in this era. I think that whole 20s era, for the most part, is like you grow up and you get a little bit more rambunctious and rowdy and a little more tired because road years are like dog years. And so when we get fed up with one another, that's another story. But it's not very positive, encouraging. So we'll leave that. But anyways, I think when you get older, you get a little less. For us, we lived life in reverse because we were always very responsible younger. Because we didn't want mom and dad to pull us off the road. And so it was like, we can handle this. So we went in reverse with our adolescence.
It's harder when your life, your hopes, and your dreams are in the hands of your parents with the keys to the vehicle to get you there,
Yeah. I feel like we were definitely more responsible as kids. Anyways.
So you guys grew up in Oklahoma. So was it smaller town Oklahoma that you grew up in?
Yeah, I think the earlier part of our childhood, we were in southern Georgia. Mom and Dad planting churches all over the country. I think we did. Mom and Dad planted 11 churches in the U.S., and 8 out of the 11 are still out there running and going and spreading the gospel and doing good work. But so because of that, we moved a little bit. But most of our childhood, we were in southeast Georgia, a little town called Blackshear, just south of a larger metropolis named Waycross. And and then we hopped over to Mama's hometown, Wagner, Oklahoma, quite a while ago. This is home. This is definitely home. And it's just another small town. So it's sort of a melting pot of the South.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Where I go with it, I grew up in small town Wyoming, and I know when that driver's license hit in small towns, that's really when that danger hits, the early 20s. There's just something about the shenanigans in small towns that, yeah, there's things that I would get on my daughter for doing that were amazing at the time.
Yeah, that's the thing about small towns. Word travels fast.
Yeah,
so
man.
It's like, you know.
Well, especially if you're pastor's kids, so you can't get away with nothing, you know.
Better behave. Get that butt.
And then
up.
when we weren't in the small town, we were in some other small town on the road, 500 miles from home the whole time, So it was constant. We had a very go young adult life, I guess you could say.
I think that's true. We had a different childhood too. When you really think of starting at CBF as young as we were. So like a lot of those years and age where it would be, you might assume some of the shenanigans would go on again. We were probably more responsible then, just because we didn't want our dreams to disappear. But
y'all were.
But yeah, like I think Caleb being as young as he was when we first got started, me being 15, 16, whatever it was, I think a lot of the things we might have done, we were just too busy. We were just too busy on the road. We always make the joke, we were doing altar calls while everybody else was, getting their tickets and things and all that stuff. But yeah. But now, it's, we're around, we had our little middle ages there. No kidding.
Anyways. Now you get pulled over for speeding all the time, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Golly.
Only now it's in a bus, which is weird.
Yeah.
It's a whole other experience.
Yeah.
Getting pulled over speeding in a bus. That's got to be a story right there.
Well, actually, thank God,
don't get
that's
to go
never
fast.
actually happened.
Yeah, you don't get to go fast in a bus on the interstate. So when you shouldn't be speeding and when it's 35 and 40, it's very easy to go a little over the speed limit. So
I mean, yeah.
Anyways,
I just can't picture that process happening. Like the officer, like does knock on the door, like.
No,
it's what you think it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're pretty redneck too, so it looks like the Dukes of Hazzard rolling through town in a big old bus.
Most of the incidences between us and the local authorities, if you will, would normally be us on the road try to change a trailer tire.
Yeah.
With the trailer loaded down with gear on the back of a tour bus, looking like we look, and the officer drives up. Do you guys need help? You're like, no, we're pretty redneck. We got it.
Well, back in the day, though, too, like speaking of rough patches of appearances and things, I used to have dreadlocks. And so you got this big old 6'3", dreadlock-looking scary fella, and it's like I become a target in that moment. So it's like a suspect immediately. So
Jordan's trying to put his drums away in the trailer, and everybody's like, hey, that guy's stealing your equipment. We're like, yeah, he probably,
Yeah.
Look like you're a tattoo away from playing with Post Malone.
Yeah, for sure. My guy's just been released.
You said Post Malone.
Boy, one tattoo away.
Got me. Need a little drip right here.
What are some of the lessons that you guys have learned being on the road so young and, being three brothers with all the brotherly things, just being stuck in a tour bus? What are some of those lessons that you learned in that process?
Man,
so many, but
I think in the midst of the stress and the pressure, sometimes it's just the best thing to learn just to walk away.
Yeah.
I think when you're three bros and, you can be away from family, you can be out on the road for long periods of times. It's just like being in the desert at some point in the sun, you can get a little crazy. And you just gotta take a breath. And
well, you ain't sleeping right. You ain't eating right.
Yep.
It makes the communication a little bit trying. You have to learn how to employ patience. As James would talk about, like in chapter 1, it's like you definitely got to learn how to employ patience.
Well, and personalities can really play a thought. So, like all three of us, none of us are ever short of thought. So it's like you just say what comes up. So I think, man, staying in the Word, remembering to love on one another as much as you can, and then
when it's good, let it be good, man.
Enjoy it when it's good.
Enjoy it.
We got to go to a pastor's conference over a couple weeks back, and we were there for about a week in Arizona. And there may have been a couple instances we ran a little late when we were supposed to be there, just Josh was out golfing. And it's like, all right, you know what? There's been many years. Again, we've done this longer than we haven't, right?
Yeah.
17 years. So it's like there's been many years that it's been really tough. In moments like this, when you can get a break, because there's so few far in between, it's like, you know what? Let the man golf a minute. If we're 5 minutes late, it's all good.
Amen.
Yeah.
I'll testify to that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to, we'd probably spend an hour talking on that. But
It's really, I feel like it's the same, for everybody. I think it's just exaggerated because we're brothers. We have no filter around each other. And I know people that have spent years on the road together feel the same way. But it's like, number one, you got to stay goal focused. You definitely have to keep your mission in mind first. Like that has to come ahead of your own emotions and your own feelings at the time. And then just valuing our relationship. I think we were on a radio tour years ago with a radio promoter. We had to get in a little rental car and hit like 5 radio stations, hours of driving, no sleep. We're in the car and I don't know, just little petty brother stuff that we're just, poking at each other. And we get out at the radio station. This radio promoter and this guy that works as a DJ at that radio station was talking about us. And we walk in, he's going, these guys will say stuff to each other that would break up most bands. And then we get out of the car and they're like, I love you, bro. This is going to be great. It's like, and like we're hugging it out. And we're like, at this point, we don't even notice. Like, we're just living life, man. And it is fun.
Tough it up.
I think,
yeah.
Segue, and not to be a cheap segue, but a very
thick skin.
But true to the heart of the song. That's where First Things First comes from. It's like, what's the reason? What lack of better terms, the big question nowadays becomes, what's your why? You know what I mean? I think we always, at the end of every night, especially when it was our own shows, we've rarely had the opening slot. It's always just been get out there and go minister, church to church kind of thing. And so we had the opportunity to share our hearts. We had an opportunity to lead people to Jesus. That helped with our why every single night. And I think it, Lamentations 3 says his mercies are renewed every morning. That was so real for us on the road, and it still is, because every night we ended it with such gratitude of, man, as Dad would always say to us, boys, if God can use a donkey, he can use you. So yeah. In spite of ourselves, in spite of our shortcomings, at the end of every night, we got to go, dude, praise people's God. Eternities were just impacted. Yeah. I don't care how tired. I don't care what I said earlier. At the end of today, I remember why I'm still doing this, and it keeps me going the next day. And so I think exactly when we hit that season in our personal lives and as a band, all the things, we didn't know what the future looked like musically, all the things after we've done this our whole lives, it feels like now, more, like you said, more than we've not. Yeah. First Things First was a very natural emptying out your heart kind of song that came to us of like, wait a minute, let's get back to the thing that when it's your worst day, you still go, I can't stop. I don't want to stop. My heart, if I stop, it feels like Jeremiah. And then we became the namesake of our band, Consumed by Fire. It's like, when I say I'm going to stop, your word burns in my heart like a fire and I can't.
So you brought up First Things First. So I guess we'll start pulling into that one. Man, I was watching the music video earlier today, and I gotta say that one just hits hard. Just even that first shot with the gal in the mirror.
Sure.
I mean, just that whole imagery of just being consumed by our devices or work or anything like that. I mean, that was definitely one that I stopped and it's like, crap, I've got to think about this for a second. Like I wasn't quite prepared for that.
We really leaned on our team heavy on the making of that video. We had a wonderful director, Matt Lawrence, him and his team did an incredible job. Our creative team at Red Street, led by Cambria Soka, she did incredible. And so we just leaned on them a lot. And here's the reason why. Like we're very, when it comes to creatively, like visually, we actually normally are pretty outspoken. But with First Things First, this song is so interesting. I heard a DJ not too long ago, I was skimming the station and there it's the song and then he ends it and he goes, this song really metals, doesn't it? And it's like, well, that's an interesting way to put it. It metals, you know. It's like we're not really trying
gets up in your business.
Yeah, we're not trying to get up in your business. This was a really out of our heart kind of just you've kind of heard where we wrote it from a little bit, but
more of a prayer, really.
We didn't want the video to come across like we were performance driven, because that was you can quickly hear this song and go, I feel the demand to be perfect. And it's like, well, then you've missed the point. I think the point is our hearts. It's always been our hearts. The gospel centered around our hearts, not what we do and what we don't do and what makes us perfect and not perfect. The only thing that makes us in right standing with God is the finished works of Jesus. This was just a song of, it was repentance from us, from a lot of things. And it's not, normally you hear that word and you go, oh man, what did you do? It's like, no, it's what did you lose focus of? What did you let slip in your pursuits?
It's just, there is a lot of distractions. There is a lot of things in our daily lives that we give our attention to that don't necessarily really hold our heart. And those aren't the things that matter the most. And Caleb and I we were talking earlier, and, Jordan brought up a quote that our dad used to say, that we should measure our success as believers by being in the will of God, of the will of the Father. That doesn't always look like numbers or success. And it's definitely not spending every hour of your day struggling and striving to meet that number or whatever that thing is. They wrote that song and they brought it to me, and I was like, with where we were at that time, I was just like, man, this is right on. And I think a lot of people in a lot of different areas in their life, in business and in relationships and ministry and all these other things, could really need this too. And it could be their prayer. It was written not as a preachy thing, but as a prayerful thing.
Because the realness of it is that we always raised around a quote, if God's called you to it, no one should be able to talk you into it or out of it. So it's like, man, it always made us laugh growing up whenever somebody would come to him and be like, man, why didn't you tell me I wasn't supposed to move here? You're my pastor, you're my covering. Why didn't you tell me? And he'd be like, well, you said God said. And if God told you, I'm not going to be the one to try and talk you out of it. It's like, at the end of the day,
be fully persuaded, Paul would say. Be fully persuaded,
There's mentors in my life that I've always heard say that if it feels like God's been quiet, do the last thing that he told you. Yeah, he does move on. There are new seasons. There are new chapters. But God's also the same yesterday, today, and forever. He's not flighty. He doesn't just run off and lead you on a wild goose chase. It's like, man, just go to the last thing that God told you. And I think you're going to find that sometimes it feels like, how many places in the Word can you go back and look at numbers maybe didn't follow, or maybe it was a long period of time in between when God told you something and it went and appeared like it wasn't going to happen. So as believers, we got to be to the point to where, hey, you told me that, I'm going to keep that first. I ain't going to chase numbers. I ain't going to chase success and dollar signs. If this is your will, I'm going to hold put.
And that's what success has to be.
And I think that's where, going back to it, because we were in such a season of...
the numbers weren't there.
Numbers weren't there, feeling burnt out, and just going, you know what, man, forget this. We've done this for 15 years, 14 years. I can't do it anymore. And Dad...
well, not only even that, we were... exactly.
Dad
we were
a major stroke at the time. And so many things were... it hit the fan for us as a family.
We were locked in a hospital for months, long before COVID was ever a thing. We were basically in the hospital every day, nonstop, around the clock for literal months. And then all of a sudden this COVID thing happens and the whole world was locked down.
We kind of tell the story.
We really...
the world stopped spinning for everybody in 2020. Our world stopped spinning in February 2019. And it felt that way. And so when you write a song like First Things First, I think the emotions that hit you, just seeing the testimonies that have poured in, it's like, oh, wow. That's when we said this is the first song that we've ever been a part of that wrecked us the way it kind of, the testimonies reflect the same kind of wrecking ball that the Holy Spirit has done with these lyrics and these melodies, how they all combine and just leave you undone. We were undone when it was being written. So,
Absolutely.
I love how you guys are talking about basically the numbers lie, if I can sum that up. And that's been, I don't know, a soapbox of mine lately is we as a society have so many ways to capture data. Whether it's standardized test scores, whether it's Instagram likes, streams, plays, attendance at church, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think we've lost what do the numbers actually mean.
That's right.
Times.
Dude, we serve a God that says, I'm going to go after the one.
Right. Come on.
At the end of it, we really have to get back to it. It's man.
Well, we were talking earlier to somebody about how it felt like all the numbers came when we stopped worrying about the numbers. As ironic as it is, it's definitely intentional. When you look at the heart behind first things first, Matthew 6:33, seek the kingdom first, and then all these other things will be added as a result.
Yeah.
I think we're watching right now for us personally, and the path we're on with first things first. It's so wild. We've never seen such response in the volume that's happening. And how funny is it? The namesake of the song, the heart behind the song, Jesus said, all these other things will be added if you just seek the kingdom first. So it's not just irony, it's scripture coming to life, and we're living out first things first right now. And so we're kind of overwhelmed by it. We're kind of in an overwhelming season of, wow, we know the word works, but we're watching it work right now, and praise God for it. So it's a testimony of the word being alive and active. So,
yeah.
So you touched a little bit on the why it's been 5 years since you've released any new albums or EPs.
mm-hmm.
It was your father, and then
Yeah.
of course, we just won't talk about that 2 years around 2020.
Yeah.
We'll just pull that out.
Nobody wants to talk about that no more.
The numbers weren't there. Nobody cared. Anyways.
No, it's that. Like the whole world was going. The numbers we were seeing were the ones nobody wanted to see at that time. So.
Well, you're referring to the country
COVID,
music and stuff that we put out, Jake.
Well, so I was looking at your catalog, and there's a kind of a gap from about 17 to when you guys released the EP here.
Sure.
Just a couple months or about a month ago from when we were recording this.
Yeah.
So that was actually one of the things I had queued up, but you guys answered it ahead of me. So maybe I just head out here and just let you guys run.
I'm sorry. We get, that's the thing. It's about one of our buddies calls us the three-headed monster.
Man. It'll wear you out.
We can take you down any trail you want to go on, brother.
No, we never stopped writing though, Jake. It's like there were obviously those few months where every day was life and death and critical with Dad that we weren't really writing songs then. I think thoughts of songs would come, and as any songwriter would do, write it down, voice memo, those kinds of things. Pieces of songs were coming. But when every day wasn't so critical, it seemed like the Lord just opened up this door, just like He does when it's not so critical every day, and we can actually invest a little time into it. Jay DeMarcus and some other friends of ours that were over at Red Street told us what they had going on, and we said, well, we don't know that we can be an artist right now. We really need to be with our family. Now, this would have been the end of 2019, actually, going into 2020. We had that opportunity. And by early 2020, we'd signed a publishing deal with Red Street Records to write. And that was an outlet for us, bro. It was so sweet. And Jay was so gracious to let us just write anything we wanted to write, really. And then songs like Good Morning Mercy for Jason Crabb would come out of it. Many songs for Jason, but Good Morning Mercy being the most heard one so far, I guess, out of those songs.
Yeah.
In You for Yvette Luna, one of our artists we found through a thing we do called the Academy of Dreamers, where we find young artists all over the country. We found an artist named Yvette Luna, and wow. Red Street was so gracious to give her a deal, and she had a pretty great impact last year, and she's still going. So I think in the behind the scenes seasons, there was still so much growth. There was a nurse in the hospital. It was funny. I was on a FaceTime or Zoom with Jay and Don Cook one day, and we're making plans and doing things. And I'm in the hospital there with my dad. It was during COVID, actually. They were so gracious to let one of us stay. They let me stay in there during that time, which was unheard of.
Yeah.
And the nurse walked in, and she felt like she was interrupting a bit. Well, she was, honestly, interrupting a business call. And she goes, "That's just unheard of." She said, most people right now are stopped, and most people in your position would never have this kind of opportunity to grow. You know what I mean? To do anything, let alone grow. And God's favor and mercy and grace in that season that nobody saw, man, it brought us to the end of ourselves. And that's how a song like First Things First comes about. It's the goodness of God that leads your heart to change. It's the goodness of God when you go, man, I should have died. That goes, man, Lord, I just want to give it all to you. If not, it been for the mercy of Jesus kind of thing, Yeah.
Pulling a little bit on the thread of your dad and that being a lot of your musical influences, the stuff that you listened to growing up. what are some of those stories? What are some of the artists and music that you guys grew up listening to that has influenced you guys?
Oh my goodness.
Man, I was born in 93. So I think for some of the songs, like in 04, How Great Is Our God's coming out, right? I think there's, I remember 2000, Third Day released the Offerings Worship, their first volume 1. And there was a song on there that just blew me away. What's the name of that song? I've heard it said. Love Song?
Yeah.
Love Song.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so mine looks a little different than the guys.
But a lot of the same stuff, yeah.
We grew up, so you mentioned Love Song by Third Day, and what's funny is we went and saw the Jesus Revolution movie the other night with the kids, and Love Song that came out of that, the Jesus movie.
The band, yeah.
They started playing, the band in the movie started playing songs that me and Jordan were like, we remember our dad who grew up right in the middle of that era, got saved in the middle of that era. We remember our dad playing these songs on like acoustic guitar all the time. And I'm like, that is hilarious. I never knew where that song even came from. I didn't know if he made it up. It was awesome. But like all that stuff is totally our roots, and our roots really go back to really, I guess most people probably argue that's like the beginning of like the CCM as we know it with Jesus music back in the day. And it's like, that's literally been embedded into our DNA since we were
I don't feel like we missed out on the Jesus movement. Wild. I feel like
we've been in this the whole time.
It's weird because like you said, because Dad always wrote songs. Mommy and Dad wrote songs. So like you said, when Dad played a song we'd never heard before, we just assumed maybe he wrote it. You know what I mean?
We thought he might have wrote it. Yeah.
That chorus.
We just didn't ask questions.
That chorus of the, since I opened up the door, can't think of anything else but you anymore. Like that song was a part of our lives as kids.
Like legit.
Anyway, I didn't know it was an actual band that sang
it. But as much as Dad introduced us to bands like Chicago, we'd go on these long road trips or ministry trips, and sometimes he'd just break out the Chicago's greatest hits, stay awake going down the road, all the horns and everything going. So that's been an influence. Yeah. Just the singer-songwriter vibes, the James Taylors, and of course all the great gospel records. I mean, we were introduced to Bill Gaither and the Gaither Vocal Band. I think like every good Southern Christian, was.
Tapes, the Goodmans, the Martins.
Oh man, some of that stuff. Like it's all there, all the different elements.
But then we would looking back now, Georgia, come back to Oklahoma, the mama side of the family, and all of our crazy uncles would, be playing all the Bob Seger stuff, and it's like, well, let me tell you on some.
Or Leonard Skinner,
the Eagles, Leonard Skinner,
so much of all of it.
Yeah, the Allman Brothers.
Man, it's such a
oh yeah, and then the country side was more from my mom's side too. We'd come and visit. Every year we'd make the drive from Georgia to Oklahoma before we moved here, and it was like I'd get up early in the morning, before the sun came up with my grandfather, and we'd get in his pickup truck and we'd go, and he had a little ranch area that he had with his brother-in-law, and we'd feed the cows. That was a whole ordeal. It was like, George Jones and Loretta Lynn and Waylon Jennings and all these old country guys.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
We were pretty well-roundedly influenced, to say the least.
I think a lot of folks, too, they get into a place of like, is that allowed? That never really came up. I'm not going to lie. Like, if it was a bad song, what we did? Dad would go, we ain't listening to that. And we'd just move on. Like, it was not a big thing. We didn't ever do a CD burning. You know what I mean? Like, as far as like a burn pile, like burn all your stuff. Like,
you remember Hell's Bells, right?
Yeah.
That was epic. I remember watching that on VHS as a kid. Oh my God, I like that song.
Another one, Bites the Dust, is about what?
Oh, Hell's Bells. Yeah.
Stairway to Heaven backwards says a lot of things.
Did all the Fire by Night stuff.
Yeah, Blaine Bartell.
Bartell. He was in all the Fire by Night stuff. And I just remembered watching an episode as a kid. And there was one where he fell down this hole and went to hell or something.
Yeah.
It was so awesome. I love giving him a hard time over that.
It's funny. But with a lot of those things, as much as we were aware of them, I don't want to act like we weren't.
Yeah.
Mom and Dad were so musical, and that was so big part of like who they were. Dad would always tell us that there's a place for love songs and there's this place for songs about life. There isn't a place to put junk in your spirit at any point. And you do have to let the Holy Spirit convict and have his way and do that work in you. He would even tell me one time, I remember being, I don't remember how old I was, but talking about I was going through a heartbreak, and he's like, "Son, stop listening to sad songs." And, it's like, well, okay. I mean, that's practical but true.
I thought that's what they were for.
So he's like, you're not going to heal very easily just listening to all these sad songs all the time. So, anyways, there's a place, there's a time, and you never want to fill your spirit with junk or garbage. But I think so often we can demonize things that are actually beautiful.
So as we wrap up the episode here.
Poor Jake. He's like, I don't know what to do.
Well, that was about 30 minutes ago. Oh, no, but I just have to end this episode because I think it's absolutely awesome. You had said, Caleb, that there's not a spare thought between y'all.
You see it now, don't you, Jake? You see it.
Well, there's some things that only are said in the South, that only live in the South. That is just absolutely amazing. What are some of your guys' best Southern phrases? Redneck phrases, Southern phrases. It's
we gotta have many.
I heard one the other day from an older gentleman on the golf course, and I don't know if I had ever heard it before. I think I understood exactly what he meant.
Is this okay, Josh? Is this good?
It's no. I'm pretty sure.
Some of those sayings, Jake, would get us in trouble.
He said,
"I'm trying to clean it up here." Like, I don't think I can say this.
He said, "No."
How cold is it outside, Jake? I don't know. You know what I mean?
He was a Southern gentleman, and he got up on the tee box and he hit the ball and he said, "Well, I'm not going to hit it good if I'm lined up all cattywampus." And I'm like, okay, all right. And I've not been able to stop using it I don't know if I'm using it correctly, but now anything that is a little off is now cattywampus for me. That is my new Southern word of the week.
We didn't even know we were saying things that other people didn't say. Like when I said, "I reckon this," or "over yonder there," or
man,
that person's not worth their salt, or trying to think of all the different things. They're like, "Oh, they're salt of the earth." Like we just didn't ever question those things, But anyway, there was one I heard the other day. I'm going to say it. You can cut it out. Can you cut things out? Well, just in case you can't, I was just going to say it anyway. It made me laugh so hard, and maybe it's just, I don't care if you use it. It's funny as all get out to me. You know how sometimes Southern people in church, they could get all judgy and a little extra, you know what I mean? But then they just start whispering. It's the whole, I don't repeat gossip, so listen up kind of thing, But there was this one where it cracked me up because we all know this person. It's like, you see what she's wearing? She wore that to church. That girl's jeans so tight she'd fart and blow her boots off. And it cracked me up. I laughed for an hour. I replayed it. She fart and blow her boots off. And I just like, I've never heard that.
That's awesome.
But I know that guy that would say it. Or that woman.
Oh, have mercy.
That is amazing.
That girl's jeans so tight she'd fart and blow her boots off. Good Lord. Anyways. Josh trying not to be upset. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's like my new favorite thing.
That's how we do.
Yeah.
That beats cattywampus all day. Man.
I felt like cattywampus was a little too northern for me. I don't like it. But.
Maybe, he had a southern drawl. I said I was full as a tick the other day, and a guy looked at me weird.
Or like when you're done, like that's another, when you're done eating, we say the most inappropriate thing, like, "Man, I'm done. You put a fork in me, I am done," kind of thing,
Yeah, hang on.
Man. Caleb's over here wishing he wouldn't have started this.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Yeah, absolutely.
So's Jake, though.
Yeah.
It takes one to know one.
Take the knife, call it. You just chainsaw it all down.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, guys, this has been awesome. Just thank you so much for taking some time here. And like I said, if you haven't heard it, make sure that you stream First Things First. Watch the video. It'll cut you hard. I said, guys, just thank you so much for taking the time.
Hey, man. Thank you for putting up with us. You don't have to use any of this.
You don't.
You can never air this, and it'll be okay.
It's probably best if you don't.
We'll do a new one tomorrow.
There you go.